I inherited my grandpa, Thomas's Lakeside cabin 6 months ago. It was our special place where he taught me to fish hike and value independence. When my brother-in-law Daniel lost his job, he asked to move in temporarily. I politely declined offering to help him find somewhere else. Last week, he called again, desperate, because his pregnant girlfriend needed stability. I stood firm on my boundaries. Driving up for a peaceful weekend, I was shocked to find a moving truck in my driveway and Jessica setting up a nursery in my house. Before I continue this nightmare drop, a comment letting me know, if you have ever had a family member completely disrespect your boundaries, hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear how I handled this shocking invasion of my private sanctuary. My relationship with my grandfather, Thomas, was something I treasured above almost everything else in my life. As a kid growing up in Michigan, the highlight of every summer was spending 2 full weeks at his cabin by Lake Huron. He bought that place back in the 70s when lakefront property was still affordable, and it became our family's gathering spot for decades. Thomas was a man of few words, but infinite wisdom. During those summer days, he would wake me at dawn to go fishing, teaching me how to bait a hook and wait patiently for the fish to bite. "The water teaches you patience, Fred," he would say in his gravelly voice, "and patience is what separates boys from men." In the afternoons, we would hike the surrounding woods, where he showed me how to identify edible berries and navigate using just the Sunday. Around the campfire at night, he would tell stories about our family history, about his time in Vietnam, and about the importance of having your own space in this world. A man needs a place where he can hear his own thoughts. Thomas would often say, staring into the flames, "Without that, you will never know who you truly are." When he passed away 6 months ago, at 84, I was devastated. We had remained close, even as I grew up and moved to Chicago for my job in advertising. I would still visit the cabin at least once a month, sometimes bringing friends, but often going alone, seeking that peace he had taught me to value. The reading of his will was a surprise to everyone. While he divided most of his modest savings among his 3 children, my mother and my 2 uncles, he specifically left the Lakeside cabin to me. To Frederick James Wilson, I leave my cabin and the surrounding 5 acres, as he alone understands what this place truly means. Those words in his will made me cry harder than I had at his funeral. The responsibility of preserving his legacy weighed heavily on me, but it also felt like the greatest honor he could have bestowed. My family situation had always been somewhat complicated. My sister Sarah is 6 years older than me, and she had always played a protective role in my life after our parents divorced when I was 10. Sarah stayed with our mom while I bounced between both parents, and she often stepped in when they were too busy with their own lives to attend my school events or help with homework. I always looked up to her strength and resilience. 5 years ago, Sarah married Daniel Harper, a financial advisor, who seemed successful and charming at first. They had what appeared to be a perfect life in the suburbs of Detroit. A nice house, good jobs, and plans for children. But about 8 months ago, everything changed when Daniel was laid off from his position at a major investment firm. The layoff seemed to break something in him. His confidence shattered, and he became increasingly bitter and entitled. Sarah confided in me that Daniel had started drinking heavily and staying out late. Their marriage deteriorated rapidly, and 3 months ago, she asked him to move out. What shocked everyone wasn't just the separation itself, but what came next. Within weeks, Daniel announced he was seeing someone new, a 24-year-old named Jessica who worked as a barista at his favorite coffee shop. More surprising still, Jessica was already 4 months pregnant with his child. The whole situation created massive tension in our family. Sarah was heartbroken, but determined to move forward with divorce proceedings. Our mother was furious with Daniel, while I tried to remain neutral for Sarah's sake. I had never been particularly close with Daniel, finding his boasting about financial conquests somewhat off-putting, but I had made efforts for my sister's sake. My own life in Chicago kept me busy enough to avoid much of the family drama. At 32, I had worked my way up to senior creative director at my advertising agency, a job that consumed most of my waking hours with client demands, pitch preparations, and constant deadlines. The cabin had become my essential escape valve, the only place where I could truly disconnect from emails, calls, and the relentless pace of city life. After inheriting the cabin, I spent 3 months renovating it, updating the plumbing, reinforcing the dock, and refinishing the hardwood floors my grandfather had installed by hand decades ago. I preserved his fishing gear exactly as he had left it, hanging on the wall like sacred artifacts. The work was therapeutic, helping me process my grief while honoring his memory through my labor. That's why Daniel's first request to use the cabin caught me completely off guard. He called one evening as I was finishing a particularly stressful workday. "Fred, buddy, how are you doing?" His forced cheerfulness immediately put me on edge. "Fine, Daniel. What's up? Look, I know things are weird with the family right now, but I'm in a bit of a tight spot. Jessica and I are looking for a place, and I was thinking maybe we could use the cabin for a while, just until I get back on my feet." The request stunned me into momentary silence. This man was still technically married to my sister, had gotten another woman pregnant, and now wanted to live in my recently inherited property. "I don't think that would work, Daniel," I finally replied, keeping my tone even. "The cabin is my private space, and honestly, I'm there most weekends." "Come on, man," he pressed. "You have your fancy apartment in Chicago. We're talking about a pregnant woman here. We just need something temporary." "I'm sorry, but no. I can help you look for affordable rentals if you want. Maybe make some calls." "Forget it," he snapped before hanging up. I thought that was the end of it, but last week Daniel called again. This time his tone was desperate. "Fred, please. Jessica is 6 months along now. Her roommate is kicking her out because of noise complaints or some bull. We really need a stable place for just a few weeks while we figure things out. I promise we will respect the property." Again, I refused as gently but firmly as I could. "Daniel, I understand you are in a tough situation, but the cabin is not an option. I can loan you some money for a security deposit somewhere if that helps. You just do not get it, do you?" His voice turned cold. "Family is supposed to help family. But fine, we will figure it out ourselves." The conversation left me feeling guilty, but also convinced I was making the right decision. The cabin was not just property to me. It was a sanctuary, a connection to my grandfather, and the one place in my life that remained untouched by the demands of others. Little did I know that Daniel had already made plans that completely disregarded my refusal. I left Chicago early last Friday, looking forward to a weekend of solitude at the cabin. The 4-hour drive north always felt like a journey of decompression, each mile taking me further from spreadsheets, client revisions, and office politics. By the time I turned onto the gravel road leading to the cabin, I usually felt the tension in my shoulders beginning to dissolve. But this time, as I rounded the final bend through the pine trees, something immediately felt wrong. The golden afternoon sunlight illuminated an unfamiliar sight. A large moving truck parked in my gravel driveway, its back doors open wide, like the maw of some predatory beast. Beside it sat a blue sedan I recognized as Daniel's car. My stomach dropped as the implications hit me. He would not dare. He could not possibly be moving in after I had explicitly told him no. Twice. I pulled my Subaru to a stop behind the truck, my peaceful weekend evaporating like morning mist off the lake. This man was still technically married to my sister, had gotten another woman pregnant, and now wanted to live in my recently inherited property. "I don't think that would work, Daniel," I finally replied, keeping my tone even. "The cabin is my private space, and honestly, I'm there most weekends." "Come on, man," he pressed. "You have your fancy apartment in Chicago. We're talking about a pregnant woman here. We just need something temporary." "I'm sorry, but no." The cabin was not just property to me. It was a sanctuary, a connection to my grandfather, and the one place in my life that remained untouched by the demands of others. Little did I know that Daniel had already made plans that completely disregarded my refusal. I left Chicago early last Friday, looking forward to a weekend of solitude at the cabin. Walking toward my own front door felt surreal, like entering someone else's dream or nightmare. Inside, the changes were immediately apparent. Boxes were stacked along the wall of the entryway. A collection of unfamiliar shoes had been arranged on the boot mat my grandfather had carved by hand. The distinct smell of new paint hung in the air. Through the truck's open rear, I could see furniture I did not recognize: a crib still in its box, a rocking chair, plastic storage bins, labeled baby clothes, and several pieces that looked like they belonged in a cheap apartment. The front door of my cabin stood wide open, lights blazing inside despite the afternoon brightness. I could hear movement and voices coming from within, my private space already invaded and transformed without my consent. Following the sounds of activity, I moved through the living room, noting with growing anger that the furniture had been rearranged, and down the hallway toward the cabin's second bedroom. This had been my room as a child, and I had recently converted it into a home office where I could occasionally work remotely. What I saw stopped me cold in the doorway. The room had been completely transformed. My desk and bookshelves were gone, replaced by a partially assembled crib. Daniel said you might stop by this weekend to welcome us. The audacity of this statement rendered me momentarily speechless. Welcome them to my own property that they were colonizing without permission. Where is Daniel? I finally managed my voice tight, with controlled anger. Jessica stepped down from the ladder, one hand protectively on her belly. He went to get more paint. The hardware store in town only had enough for one wall. She gestured proudly at her handiwork. What do you think? We are going for a woodland nursery theme. I hope you do not mind that we moved your stuff to the shed. Daniel said you hardly ever use this room. Each word she spoke drove my blood pressure higher. Not only had Daniel moved them in without permission, but he had also clearly led Jessica to believe that I had approved everything. Jessica, I said, trying to keep my voice level, did Daniel tell you this is my cabin, that he asked to stay here, and I explicitly told him no? Her smile disappeared, confusion clouding her features. What no, he said. He said you two had worked everything out, that you were happy to help family in need and understood our situation. Her hand moved protectively over her belly again. He said you told him we could stay here until after the baby is born. The magnitude of Daniel's deception was becoming clear. He had not just ignored my refusal, he had created an entirely fictional agreement to manipulate Jessica. That is absolutely not true, I told her firmly. I own this cabin. My grandfather left it to me when he died. Daniel called me twice asking to stay here, and I said no both times. The last time was just last week. Jessica's face paled, her eyes growing wide. But he promised me. She sank onto the rocking chair, looking stricken. He said this would be our fresh start, that his family was helping us. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her despite my anger. It appeared she was as much a victim of Daniel's lies as I was. I am sorry, but you need to call him right now, I said firmly. Tell him to come back immediately so we can sort this out. With trembling hands, Jessica pulled out her phone and called Daniel. I could hear his cheerful voice answer then, the rapid shift in his tone as she told him I had arrived. The call ended quickly. He is on his way back, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. He said there must be some misunderstanding. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. There is no misunderstanding. He knew exactly what he was doing. While waiting for Daniel to return, I examined the rest of the cabin, discovering more changes that made my blood boil. My grandfather's fishing gear had been moved from its place of honor by the fireplace to make room for a television I did not recognize. The kitchen cabinets had been reorganized with unfamiliar dishes, replacing my grandfather's sturdy enamelware. Even the refrigerator had been stocked with their food, my few items pushed to the back shelves. Each discovery felt like another violation, another piece of my sanctuary corrupted. By the time I heard Daniel's car pulling into the driveway 30 minutes later, my initial shock had crystallized into cold, hard anger. He entered carrying 2 cans of paint, his face arranged in an expression of innocent confusion that only fueled my rage. "Fred, what a surprise! I thought you were coming tomorrow." "Cut the crap, Daniel," I said, standing in the middle of what felt less and less like my own living room. "You know damn well I told you that you could not stay here. Twice." Daniel set down the paint cans and spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness that seemed practiced and insincere. "Look, I know you were hesitant, but I figured once you thought about our situation, Jessica being pregnant me between jobs, you would understand this is the compassionate solution. It is just temporary, I promise." "Temporary," I repeated incredulously. "You are painting walls and assembling furniture. You moved all my things without permission. You told Jessica I had agreed to this when you knew perfectly well I refused." Daniel's reasonable facade began to crack, revealing flashes of the entitlement beneath. "What difference does it make to you? You are in Chicago most of the time anyway. This place just sits empty. That is not the point, and you know it. This is my property, mine, not yours to use whenever you feel like it." Jessica stood in the hallway watching our exchange, with growing discomfort, one hand resting on her prominent belly, as if to shield the baby from the conflict. "So what, you would rather see a pregnant woman homeless than share a little space?" Daniel's voice took on a performative outrage, clearly playing to Jessica's presence. "I thought family meant something to you. Your grandfather would be ashamed." That was the wrong thing to say. The mention of my grandfather sent a surge of protective fury through me. "Do not you dare bring him into this. He valued respect and honesty, 2 things you clearly know nothing about. You have until tomorrow morning to get your things and get out." Daniel's mask of reasonableness disappeared entirely. "We are not going anywhere. Jessica needs stability. The stress of moving again could harm the baby. You should have thought of that before you lied to her and trespassed on my property," I shot back. Our argument was interrupted by the ringing of my phone. It was Sarah, my sister, Daniel's estranged wife. I stepped outside to take the call, needing a moment away from the suffocating tension in the cabin. "Fred Max just called me," she said, referring to a mutual friend who lived near the lake. "He said he saw a moving truck at your cabin. Please tell me Daniel is not trying what I think he is." The concern in her voice made me realize this situation was even more complicated than I had thought. "He and Jessica are here right now, Sarah. They have been painting walls and moving in furniture. He told her I had agreed to let them stay." Sarah's explosive sigh carried through the phone. "That manipulative jerk? Fred, I am so sorry. This is not the first time he has done something like this. When we were having problems, he told everyone I had agreed to him taking money from our savings for his investments. I never agreed to anything. Learning that this behavior was part of a pattern only strengthened my resolve. I have told him to leave by morning." "Be careful," Sarah warned. "He will not go easily. When cornered, Daniel always escalates. He will try to make you the villain, especially in front of Jessica. Maybe give yourself some time to think before doing anything drastic." I know this is awful, but with Jessica being pregnant, I could hear the conflicted emotions in her voice. Despite everything Daniel had done, Sarah still felt some responsibility toward Jessica and the unborn child, a child that would technically be her stepchild if they had still been together. "I will think about it," I promised, though my mind was already made up. "Thanks for the warning." By the time I returned inside, Daniel had apparently convinced Jessica to go lie down in the master bedroom, my bedroom, claiming she needed to rest after the stressful misunderstanding. This left the 2 of us alone in the living room, the pretense of civility completely abandoned. "You need to understand something," Daniel said, his voice low and threatening. I have nowhere else to go right now. Jessica believes in me, and I am not going to let her down because you are being selfish about a cabin you barely use. This is not about how often I use it, I countered. This is about respect and boundaries, which you have completely disregarded. Boundaries, he scoffed. Real families help each other out when things get tough. But you would not know about that, would you? Always the loner, even as a kid. Sarah told me how you would hide from family gatherings in your room. The personal attack stung, but I refused to be baited. I am not discussing this anymore tonight. I am going to get a hotel room in town. When I come back tomorrow, I expect you to be packing up, not settling in further. As I turned to leave, Daniel called after me. By the way, I had to start some renovations already. That wall between the second bedroom and the sun porch, it is coming down tomorrow to make the nursery bigger. Hope you do not mind. I froze, then forced myself to keep walking without responding. His words were clearly meant to provoke me to escalate the confrontation to a point where Jessica would witness me losing control. I would not give him that satisfaction. That night, lying in a lumpy bed at the Pine Haven Motel 5 miles from my own cabin, I received a series of text messages from Daniel, started prepping the wall for removal. This place has good bones, but needs modernizing. Thinking of refinishing all the floors next week. The current finish is outdated. Jessica loves it here, says it feels like home already. Each message was designed to enrage me, to make me feel powerless. Sleep eluded me as I stared at the water-stained ceiling, trying to decide on my next move, while the sanctuary my grandfather had built was being dismantled by an entitled intruder. The next morning, I drove back to the cabin with a clear plan in mind. I would remain calm, document any damage done, and if Daniel refused to leave voluntarily, I would explore legal options. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an elderly man standing near the tree line, Joe Miller, my grandfather's friend and nearest neighbor, whose cabin was about a quarter-mile down the shoreline. I parked and walked over to greet him, grateful for the familiar face. "Morning, Fred," Joe said, his weathered face creased with concern. "Saw the commotion yesterday. Wanted to check if everything is all right." "Not really, Joe. My brother-in-law decided to move in without permission." Joe nodded slowly, figured something was off. "That fella told me last week he was the new owner. Said you had transferred the cabin to him as payment for some financial help he gave you." My stomach dropped. "He said what?" "Told everyone at the general store the same story. Even changed the mailing address with Barb at the post office. Said all cabin mail should go to him now." This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Daniel had not just moved in, he was systematically trying to establish himself as the owner of my property. The level of calculation involved was staggering. "Joe, I never gave or sold this cabin to anyone. My grandfather left it to me, and I intend to keep it." "Thought as much," Joe said with a nod. "Your grandpa would not have wanted that smooth talker in his place." The man was asking about refinancing options yesterday at the diner, telling folks he was planning to upgrade the entire property. Armed with this disturbing information, I thanked Joe and headed inside. The cabin was quiet, but I could hear movement in the kitchen. I found Jessica making coffee, still in pajamas, looking exhausted. "Where is Daniel?" I asked without preamble. She startled slightly. "He went to the hardware store again. Said he needed supplies for the wall project." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, I need to tell you something, and it is going to be hard to hear. Daniel has been lying to a lot of people, including you. He has been telling the townspeople that I gave him this cabin, that he owns it now. He even changed the mailing address at the post office." Her face crumpled. "What? No, he would not." But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the pieces falling into place. "He told me this was going to be our forever home. That your family wanted to help us start fresh. I am sorry, but none of that is true. This property is mine legally and formally. Daniel has no claim to it whatsoever." Tears filled her eyes. "I do not understand why he would lie about something so important. I left my apartment, because he promised me stability here. I felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. Has he done this before? Made promises based on things that were not his to give. She wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. He promised me a big wedding at his family's country club. Later I found out his family does not belong to any club. He told me he was getting a settlement from his former employer that would let us buy a house. Then last week, it suddenly became this cabin instead. The pattern was clear, and I suspected Jessica was finally seeing it too. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car in the driveway. Moments later, Daniel burst in carrying more supplies, his energy frenetic. Got everything we need to open up that wall, and he stopped short when he saw us together, his eyes darting between us suspiciously. What is going on? I was just telling Jessica about your conversations with the locals, I said evenly, about how you have been claiming to own my cabin. Daniel's face flushed, but he recovered quickly. I never said that. People must have misunderstood. You changed the mailing address, Daniel, I said. That is not a misunderstanding. Look, I was just being practical. Since we will be staying here for the foreseeable future, no, you will not. I cut him off. This ends now. You lied to Jessica. You lied to me. You lied to the entire town. You are not staying here another night. Daniel's demeanor changed instantly, his face hardening. We are not leaving. In fact, I have already consulted a lawyer. You verbally agreed to let us stay here. That is a binding agreement. That is absolutely false, and you know it. It is your word against mine, he sneered. And I have a pregnant girlfriend who will testify that you promised us housing, then tried to make us homeless out of spite. I looked at Jessica, who seemed shell-shocked by this new side of Daniel. Is that what you would do? I asked her directly. Lie under oath because he told you to. Before she could answer, Daniel stepped between us. Stop trying to manipulate her. Jessica, go lie down. This stress is not good for the baby. Stop telling me what to do, Daniel. Jessica said, her voice stronger than I had heard it before. You have been lying to me from the start. Have not you? Daniel's face reddened. I did what I had to do to provide for you and our child. Fred here has everything. A high-paying job, an apartment in the city, and this cabin that he barely uses. He does not need it like we do. That does not give you the right to take it, Jessica said quietly. Daniel turned on her. Whose side are you on? Do you want to be homeless? Because that is what he is offering you. I had seen enough. I am leaving now, I told them both. When I come back this afternoon, I expect to see progress on packing, not more renovations. If not, the next people to show up will be the sheriff's deputies. I drove straight into town, my mind made up. My first stop was the law office of Patricia Hammond, who had handled my grandfather's estate. Though it was Saturday, I had her cell number, and she agreed to meet me at her office, given the urgency. After hearing my story, Patricia confirmed what I already suspected. I had every legal right to evict Daniel and Jessica as trespassers. You need to file a formal eviction notice, she advised. Given the circumstances, that they have no lease and entered without permission, we can request an expedited hearing. In the meantime, document everything. Take photos of any changes or damages they have made. From there, I went to the local police station where I filed a report about the unauthorized entry and occupation of my property. The deputy was sympathetic, especially when I explained the situation with Jessica. We can send someone out with you when you return, he offered. Not to remove them forcibly, that would require a court order, but to keep the peace while you deliver the formal notice Patricia is preparing. By early afternoon, I had an official eviction notice in hand and was heading back to the cabin with a sheriff's deputy following in his patrol car. I felt a strange mix of relief, determination, and sadness. This was not how I had envisioned spending my weekend at my grandfather's beloved cabin. As we pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see not only Daniel's car but also a red SUV I recognized as belonging to my sister Sarah. The situation had apparently escalated beyond just the four of us. Inside, I found a tense standoff in the living room. Sarah stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. Jessica sat on the couch, eyes red from crying, and Daniel paced back and forth, his face contorted with anger. "What is she doing here?" I asked, nodding toward my sister. "I called her," Jessica said quietly. "I needed to hear the truth from someone else. I needed to know if Daniel has been lying about everything." Sarah stepped forward. "I told her everything, Fred, about how Daniel has a pattern of taking what is not his, of making promises based on other people's resources, about how he nearly drained our savings before I caught on." Daniel stopped pacing to point an accusatory finger at Sarah. "You turned her against me. After everything we have been through, you did that yourself," Sarah replied calmly. "Just like you did with me." The arrival of the sheriff's deputy silenced any further argument. I introduced him and explained why he was there. "I have a formal eviction notice," I said, handing the document to Daniel. "You have no legal right to be here. You need to take your things and leave." Daniel snatched the paper, skimmed it, then threw it on the floor. "This is bull. You cannot just throw us out on the street." "Actually, he can," the deputy interjected. "You have no lease, no permission to be here, and according to Mr. Wilson, you entered the property knowing you had been denied permission to stay." Daniel looked from face to face, searching for an ally and finding none. Even Jessica had moved to stand closer to Sarah, physically distancing herself from him. "Jessica," he pleaded, "tell them we cannot leave. Think about the baby." "I am thinking about the baby," she said softly. "That is why I called my sister. She is coming to pick me up. I am not going to raise my child with someone who lies and steals." The blood drained from Daniel's face as he realized he was losing control of the situation. "You are leaving me. After everything I have done for you, what have you done except lie to me?" Jessica's voice broke. "You promised me security, but it was all built on lies. I cannot trust anything you say anymore." The deputy stepped forward. "Sir, I would suggest you start packing your belongings." The situation had apparently escalated beyond just the four of us. Inside, I found a tense standoff in the living room. Sarah stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. Jessica sat on the couch, eyes red from crying, and Daniel paced back and forth, his face contorted with anger. "What is she doing here?" I asked, nodding toward my sister. "I called her," Jessica said quietly. "I needed to hear the truth from someone else. I needed to know if Daniel has been lying about everything." I felt a wave of compassion for Jessica, who had clearly been manipulated as much as the rest of us. "Where will you go?" I asked her. "My sister has a spare room," she replied, still looking shell-shocked. She said I can stay as long as I need to. The next few hours were painfully awkward as Daniel sullenly loaded his personal items into his car under the watchful eye of the deputy. Jessica's sister arrived and helped her gather her belongings, the two women whispering quietly together as they packed up the baby supplies. By evening, the moving truck had departed with the larger furniture items. Daniel had driven away without a word to anyone, and Jessica had left with her sister after apologizing to me one more time. Sarah stayed behind to help me begin restoring order to the cabin. As we worked to move my desk and bookshelves back from the shed, she broke our contemplative silence. "I am sorry about all this, Fred. I never thought Daniel would go this far. It is not your fault," I assured her. "You could not have known. But I did know what he was capable of," she said, regret heavy in her voice. "I just never thought he would target you or Grandpa's cabin. I should have warned you when he first mentioned needing a place to stay." We spent the next hour talking openly about Daniel's behavior during their marriage, the small lies that grew into bigger deceptions, the manipulation, the constant shifting of blame. It was a cathartic conversation that brought us closer than we had been in years. As the sun began to set over the lake, we sat on the dock with beers in hand, our legs dangling over the water, just as we had done as children. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "With the cabin, I mean." I looked out at the water, thinking of my grandfather and what he would do. First, I fix what Daniel damaged. Then I get better security, maybe cameras, and new locks. And then, I just keep coming here finding peace like Grandpa taught me to do. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. He left it to the right person, you know. You were always the one who understood what this place meant. Over the next few weeks, I spent every weekend at the cabin, methodically erasing the marks Daniel had left on my sanctuary. I repainted the yellow nursery wall back to its original warm cedar tone. I restored my grandfather's fishing gear to its place of honor by the fireplace. I fixed the hole Daniel had started in the wall between the second bedroom and the sun porch. Joe from next door came by, often sometimes bringing other neighbors who offered help and shared their own stories of encounters with Daniel. It became clear that he had been spinning elaborate tales throughout the community, positioning himself as the cabin's rightful owner, and me as an absentee relative who did not appreciate the property. Healing the cabin helped heal something in me too. Each repair reinforced my connection to this place and to my grandfather's memory. I found myself remembering his words about boundaries as I worked. Good fences make good neighbors, Fred, he used to say, and clear boundaries make strong relationships. Never feel bad about protecting what is yours, but never forget to be generous with what you can truly afford to give. Those words guided me when 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a text from Jessica. She was staying with her sister, had cut off contact with Daniel, and was focusing on preparing for her baby. She apologized again for her part in the invasion of my property and asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet her at a cafe in town, curious but cautious. When I arrived, I found her looking healthier and more at peace than she had at the cabin, despite being further along in her pregnancy. I wanted to thank you, she began after we had ordered coffee, for being kind to me even though I was part of violating your home, and I wanted to apologize face to face without Daniel around to twist my words. You were being manipulated, I said. I understand that now. She nodded absently, stirring her decaf. Sarah has been amazing. She has helped me see patterns I was missing. Daniel did the same thing with his previous girlfriend, before me promising her his parents' vacation home that he had no right to offer. We talked for over an hour. Jessica had started counseling to understand why she had fallen for Daniel's manipulation and was determined to build a stable life for her child on her own terms. She had found a part-time job at a local nursery and was taking online classes to finish her degree in horticulture. Before we parted, I made an offer that surprised even me. There is a small rental cottage about a mile from my cabin. The owner is a friend of my grandfather's who spends winters in Arizona. He has been looking for a caretaker to live there year-round, someone to maintain the gardens and watch the place. It might be perfect for you and the baby, especially with your horticulture background. Her eyes widened. Why would you help me after what happened? I thought about it for a moment, because helping when you can is also part of having healthy boundaries. I could not give you my cabin, but I can help connect you with an opportunity that works for everyone. 2 months later, Jessica moved into the cottage and began transforming its neglected gardens into something beautiful. She had the baby, a girl named Lily, and occasionally I would see them walking along the lakeshore path that connected our properties. Sarah filed for divorce and started dating again, seeming lighter and more like her old self each time I saw her. She even brought her new boyfriend up to the cabin for a weekend, something she had rarely done with Daniel, who had always claimed to find the rustic setting boring. As for Daniel, I heard he had moved to another state after failing to follow through on his threats of legal action. According to Sarah, he had tried the same housing scam with another woman, only to be caught and exposed much sooner. My grandfather's cabin remains my sanctuary, but it has evolved too. I installed a security system and better locks. I also created clearer rules for family usage, writing down who can visit when and under what circumstances. The boundaries are explicit now, and surprisingly, this clarity has made me more comfortable sharing the space occasionally with family members who respect them. Some weekends, when the sunset turns the lake to gold, I sit on the dock and feel my grandfather's presence. I can almost hear him saying what he told me years ago. The strongest love comes with the clearest boundaries, Fred. Remember that. And I do. Every single day. If my story resonated with you, please take a moment to share your own experiences with family boundary violations in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to a relative who overstepped? How did you handle it? Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about navigating difficult family dynamics. And if you know someone dealing with similar issues, sharing this video might help them find the courage to establish their own boundaries. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is draw a clear line.